5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
As per usual, we're here to discuss getting a little bit better every day. Last week, we posed kind of a tough question and challenged you to consider whether you are competitive or you're just being petty. And I think it may have been tough for a lot of people to realize sometimes they're very much the latter. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back, check it out when you get a chance. It's probably something everybody needs to give at least a listen to one time.
You know, man, sometimes hearing those things you don't want to hear, it's always kind of a bitter pill to swallow. But typically, it's kind of also the best medicine, you know, something everybody needs when it comes to growth and improvement. That whole nothing grows in the comfort zone or something like that. So, yeah, definitely give it a listen. If it resonates, then you got something to dig deep on.
Everybody wants to be comfortable and they think they're going to be their best selves, but people are at their best when they are being challenged. And I really believe that. And we care about you guys. So we're going to keep challenging you and we're going to keep asking you questions. And today I really think we should explore what is going on when there's those of you out there that maybe fail at doing something you're supposed to do, or you're struggling with something. And the excuse is, well, I'm just a control freak. And the question we have for you today is, are you a control freak? Or do you just have trust issues?
You know, this is a big one. And like you said, it's like, did you fail because you're a control freak, or did you fail because the truth is the exact opposite? You know, people who are truly in control, number one, are in control. And they're not just whining when things don't go their way. And number two, they understand that there will always be factors outside of their influence. So instead of worrying about those factors, they simply focus on controlling what they can control. That's part of being in control.
The first step to having any control, like you just said, Jonathan, is that you have to realize what you actually can and cannot have influence over. And that's something that Dr. Cashy, I think, has helped us all with is, don't worry about that. And when you know you don't have to worry about that, you can focus that energy towards something else. And if you're not sure, if you're just not, maybe you're on the fence and think you can control everything, I'm going to give you a pro tip. You cannot. Massive
pro tip for the win right there. You know, I think you nailed it, man. Part of being in control is just accepting the fact there are going to be things out of your control and outside of your capabilities to change. Note it, move on. You know, banging your head against the wall and hoping it falls down and losing your mind when it doesn't is not necessarily or at all what being in control is. Taking a step back and finding a way to actually get over or around it. Now that is being in control. People who actually are in control, not just freaking out all the time, they know this. And they also have the ability to give up control in certain situations and relinquish direction to those that are just better suited to set the course for them. You know, and that takes both the knowledge of where to best exert individual influence and the trust to know when to hand over those reins to others better suited for the task. Yes, relinquishing control can be a huge factor of actually remaining in control.
I completely agree that, quote, giving control up is something that kind of shows that a person is in control, because another person can just as easily say that was delegated. If something is delegated, when you use that language, it puts you in a controlled position. So depending on the lens you're looking through, giving up is not the same as delegating a task. And that is part of also what kind of shows through in terms of that sort of personality type, because the person who identifies as a control freak may have an obsession with control because they do not have much and may not know how to define it in a way that allows them to be satisfied with how much influence they do have over certain aspects of their life.
Like Jonathan just touched on, one of the forms of control is being able to give up control to maybe people that can handle it better than you. And we have a whole episode on this. If you swing back and listen to episode 10, give that a listen, and we'll really talk about delegating work and getting advice from other people and maybe letting other people help you make decisions for yourself. But in my experience, the people that are calling themselves control freaks, especially as an excuse, like, well, I didn't do this because I'm a control freak, are often the ones that seem to have the least amount of control, especially over their own behavior.
Yeah, exactly. What are you in control of versus what are you just freaking out about? Saying you're in control is not the same thing as being in control. In fact, if you were truly in control, you wouldn't have to say it at all. Your results, your progress, your outcomes, they do all the talking for you. You'd also be in control of your actions, your efforts to follow a program, your ability to listen to objective feedback, to execute a plan, and in general, just act like an adult. What it really comes down to for most people here is they aren't in control. They don't really even want to be in control. They simply want to be right, or at least feel they are. And that just isn't what being in control means.
I am definitely a control freak, 1000%. Every time I run an experiment, I make sure there's the perfect standard in which to gauge my results. All of my experiments have controls.
1000%.
Yes. As far as what you mentioned about needing to be right, I think there is this difference between like having control and needing your way. And really, if you want to think about control in practical terms, it's not about waving a magic wand, right? Because needing to be in control over everything is not practical. You can bitch and moan all day long. You don't have a magic wand to have everything go your way. So practically speaking, in terms of control, it might be helpful to think in terms of contingency, right? Where you have something planned out. You're in control of the situation. If something does not go as planned, you can change your course to continue where you need to be. That's being in control. You're not a freaking Jedi, right? It's not like you have this massive force of suggestion to change the course of the universe. Control and contingency are very closely related in practical terms. Unless you're running experiments, in which case, it better go right the first time because you don't want to do it again.
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
Now, in terms of needing to be right too, this can also lead to sort of like a perfectionista sort of attitude where if you do feel like you have control over everything or have that obsession, if something doesn't go your way, it's a great excuse to throw a fit. If something doesn't go your way, sometimes it causes people to give up. Sometimes it causes people to stomp around in circles and really set themselves back. But having control, I'm just going to pound this in, I think control and contingency need to go together in terms of practical application in real life. It's how do you deal with situations that don't go your way? And how do you still make progress despite things not going exactly the way you wanted? That's what being in control is.
I think what's interesting here is you touched on it too, is the goal actually to be in control? Or do you simply want to get what you want or have it your way? Getting what you want is not the same as being in control. It can simply be an accident. And, from an experimental context, getting the result you want, your hypothesis anyway, not what you're looking for, it can very well be an accident if you're not in control. And those, again, like you pointed out, are two totally different things.
Being in control from a literal standpoint really sucks, and nobody wants to manage that. Could you imagine if oh man, my liver needs to make more hydroxylases right now. You really want to be in control of that? You don't want control. You want everything done for you. Shut up. Could you imagine if you had to talk all right, I need a half a more unit of insulin right here, pancreas, thanks. From literally. The old control center, because that's what I think of. You have to consciously talk to your liver to produce enzymes, right?
most of us are pretty thankful for the fact that we have that lazy brain that handles a lot of that stuff. Because, there's a lot of things going on in that whole metabolism. Put your finger on it when metabolism slows down.
Yeah. Man, that mitochondria really needs to be fired.
Probably don't want to be in control of that.
God. Anyway.
Man, honestly, to circle it back a little bit, the thing is to me is do you want to be in control? Do you want to have an impact on your outcome? Do you want to kind of know how to do things and accomplish stuff? Or are you just looking to be told that, what you want to hear? Are you trying to get that pat on the back? Because honestly, confirmation bias, it's strong, and if you dig deep enough looking for the validation you're after, you're going to find it. Someone somewhere will have the answer you are looking for to suit the frame that you have made for yourself, to allow you to justify your actions and those outcomes and your results, and just wrap it up in a bow for you and say, yep, you're right, you're in control. But it doesn't mean that you are. And I think that's a big distinction people need to kind of recognize. And again, do you even want to be in control of everything? Are you capable of handling everything? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. We've used the example before of to be in control of your finances and your taxes. Every single human being should read the tax code, all 74,000 pages or whatever it's up to these days. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to delegate that to somebody else who makes that their livelihood in their profession to be in control of that facet of your life? What are you looking for?
So when people are saying, hey, I'm just a control freak, and we're identifying that you actually just have trust issues, why are the trust issues manifesting in a way that make them think it has to do with their control freakism? Why is that the excuse?
I think there might be a big social component to this. Saying that you don't trust people kind of puts you in the realm of like sociopath hide in the corner in the fetal position. And outwardly telling people that you have a need for control puts you in a position of power. So I think it's a way to posture yourself from a social standpoint.
So Jonathan, what, because we have 250, 300 members running through Relentless Dietetics right now. What does it look like when somebody actually has control over their actions, their intake, versus somebody that is saying, well, I'm just a control freak, and they're not taking care of business?
To me, someone who is in control isn't necessarily someone who has all the answers and gets it right and never makes a mistake. To me, it's someone who is aware enough of who they are, where they're at, their strengths, their weaknesses, their limitations, as well as their present situation, their surroundings, their environment, life, family, stress, all of these things, and works within those confines and that reality to kind of systematically address an obstacle and overcome it. Like T pointed out, it's the ability to take in all this information and the ability to make a calculated decision on how to advance from that place. It takes measured, deliberate, and often a frustratingly patient approach. But to me, someone that can handle that is indicative of someone who's actually in control and not just the perceived want of saying they're in control. And to go back to some of those trust issues or what it looks like when somebody's a control freak and says that they have issues following a plan because they feel they can do it better or they know everything right, is, the lack of trust, especially in a practical application, is when they just blatantly ignore those external factors. They refuse to follow a plan, refuse to be coachable, refuse to accept guidance because they want to be right or they want to believe that they're right. And I think that's that trust issue. Do you trust somebody to do something, or do you feel you can do everything the best? And I think the answer is, if you could do it the best, why haven't you done it? And that's where I think the trust issue of a quote unquote control freak comes into play, and it gets exposed for being what it is. Actually, somebody kind of whining, acting childish, and wanting to be right, even when faced with the evidence that they're wrong.
If you want to be in control, if you want to control what you can, you have to recognize first what you cannot, and then work on the things that you can. But you also have to have a level of trust to delegate to other people. Like Dr. Cashy mentioned, the word delegate I like a lot, but you have to be able to delegate to other people or trust other intelligent people enough to triangulate with them and get suggestions and come up with plans. being in control is not everything going your way. And people will have a lot less stress and anxiety in their life if they can recognize that.
Well, I think that's all we have. Thanks for listening. And when it comes to control, just remember this. The great Jim Rohn once said, "It is the set of the sails, not the direction of the wind, that determines which way we will go." And the great Dr. Kashi actually just said, "Exerting your influence is not the same thing as waving a magic wand." Both of these pretty much kind of exemplify control. They're going to utilize some trust and kind of require some patience to get you where you want to be. And neither actually involve obsessing over silly shit, majoring in the minors, always being right, or calling yourself a perfectionist when nearly everything about your life says otherwise. So, up to you to pick which one you want to be a freak about, but I reckon one's going to get you a lot further in life than the other.
You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.